mention one thing. There's a campaign out here that's getting rather rough, and it's we have a candidate that we've endorsed, and that's Ed Moore. And I don't know if you saw the editorial in the paper about do your homework. I think is the gist of it. And they took a shot at Ed, and they also took a shot at Charles Key in that editorial. One of the things they went after Ed in was a claim years ago by J.R. Church, who's no longer living, that Ed had stolen his contributor list. And that actually went to court in Cleveland County, and Ed was found innocent of that. So I would suggest that the next time the Oklahoman wants to take a swipe at somebody, they actually do their homework and get the story straight.
Yeah.
Another attack on Ed is that he raised thousands of dollars from people to build a boat to do missionary work in Micro-Asia or wherever. Thank you. And there are claims from people I'm hearing that he never built a boat. I'm going to tell you something. If Ed made these books available to folks free, this is a book he wrote. The boat's right here, and the book is a 40-some foot boat. He built it. He and his wife, he and Sandy, never did go on the mission field on it. They put $10,000 of their own money when he finished it. He was completely broke. He sold it to the mission and pulled his $10,000 out, not another penny. That boat is in the mission field still today. It's been used in the mission field still today. Another thing, and I don't know if this is hit yet in a piece, but there's a picture of Ed in a what appears to be a neo-Nazi uniform, and he's claiming, the hit piece on him is claiming that he's a neo-Nazi, and he pointed himself as a general in this kind of stuff. The truth is, that was something he wore to look like Indiana Jones in a vacation Bible school, because at the time the Indiana Jones movies were real popular with young people, so he did this in this vacation Bible school, and that's what it is. Is he a Holocaust denier? That's another one. Ed is a huge supporter of Israel. Does anyone here know one single Holocaust denier that's a supporter of Israel? You know, and so a lot of this, I actually believe, Ed many years ago ran against Helen Cole, and the Cole machine cranked up and did all those hit pieces, and now they're reaching back through research to those hit pieces and trying to bring this forward 25 years later or something to this nature. And but Ed did do something wrong. And I've expressed it over and over again that I thought he used bad judgment. And that is, in his final year in the Senate, he missed 70% of the votes. He's told why he did that. I don't think that was good judgment. I don't think it was the right thing to do. But I am sure that he will not do that again if reelected. His first 3 years in the Senate, he just had the highest score of any Republican senator there, and was named the outstanding senator by the Oklahoma Constitution newspaper in one of those years. And so, of course, when he was here, his performance, his survey was fabulous, his performance was fabulous, and I think Ed will make a very solid conservative state senator if he wins this. And he was ahead about 4 points in the primary, now runs in a primary runoff. I can tell you things about his opponent, but they're a long time back. Like Ed's 28 years ago when he missed 70% of the votes. And to me, the things about his opponent that are a long time back are a long time back, and they're not worth even bringing up, in my opinion. So, but I can tell you, Ed won overwhelmingly here of the three that were here, and he did so because he greatly outperformed the other two. And he's solid as he can be, and if he is elected, I believe he'll be a very conservative senator. I just wanted to clear some of that up because that's those efforts are reaching out all the time to destroy his character and such as that.
Charlie?
Also, one more thing, Richard, and then I'll let you have it here. 1 or 2 days ago, the Oklahoman had a lead editorial, and you'd almost thought I wrote it. I'm telling you, it was the most remarkable thing. For one thing, they went into the issue that Paul made in those famous 6 or 7 words when he said, "Are aerospace jobs really important in your jobs?" And they pointed out that, you know, there's a tax credit, a $5,000 tax credit for 4 or 5 years for everyone that goes for an aerospace engineering job. And yet, the Oklahoman makes a case for what about other people's jobs? You know, and that's all Paul was saying. He wasn't trying to promote class envy. But more important, and it really amazed me, it really laid it out, the difference in what the real struggle is as far as the economy and how we're going to have a great economy. And is that going to be the method where government collects large amounts of taxes so they can hand out subsidies in different forms, whether they're kickbacks or whatever they are? Are they going to hand them out to the friends? And it showed, this article showed how many of these subsidies really don't produce jobs.
Yeah.
Are we going to do it that way, which is a blend of fascism and socialism, or are we going to actually reduce regulations and eliminate taxes on business and let the free market loose and let it work and let people who really have entrepreneurial genius rise to the top, because those are the only kind of people that will produce the best product or service at the least amount of money. And when you subsidize the less than the best so they survive, they don't produce the best product at the least amount of money. It just doesn't work that way. And I was just so thrilled with that editorial. I probably should have made copies and brought it for everybody to see. I just might do that at some point in time. So anyway, those are things that I wanted to mention. Again, if you've not joined OCPAC, please consider doing so. Also, we have an email sign-up sheet. If you're not receiving the weekly email on a regular basis, please put your name on that. Yes, thank you.
You had referenced one half of that editorial?
Yes.
By not referencing the other person who was attacked, so that maybe you're suggesting they're right?
No, thank you. Charles Key was also attacked. And one of the people that attacked Charles Key in a different letter in the Oklahoman is Bill Burkett. How many of you know who Bill Burkett is? Okay? Mr. Burkett has been a former judge, been a former chairman of the Republican Party, was a city attorney for Oklahoma City. And that's the time that the city abused Moshe Tall. I don't want to take the time to go into the abuse again, but Moshe Tall has probably been abused by state government or by government in Oklahoma more than any person in the state of Oklahoma. I'm talking about through eminent domain and such as that. Moshe Tall, years ago, for lack of really, I don't know what to call it, similar to a class action lawsuit, of which half the people came out of this group that joined with him. And they sued the city of Oklahoma City. And Burkett threatened that if they did not withdraw that lawsuit, that he would countersue. And Moshe said, give it your best shot. So he countersued. And they went to several courts here. And in every court, Moshe Tall and the group lost. But Moshe, working pro se, not using an attorney, working pro se, appealed to the state Supreme Court. And the state Supreme Court said, you cannot get a fair trial in Oklahoma County. And so they changed the venue to Tulsa County. And they went to court in Tulsa County. And guess who got a judgment against them? Bill Burkett. In my opinion, he's nothing but an establishment bully. And he went after Charles Key, basically accusing him of being a black helicopter crowd. You know, when somebody uses the term black helicopter in reference to somebody, you know what that's intended to do? To shut you up and not discuss an issue. That's what it's intended to do. Just like calling somebody a McCarthyite. You know? Well, you'd be shocked at the books that have been written that now say McCarthy was right.
Yeah.
And boy, if you heard our speaker last week, you'd know not only was he right, he was 10 times right. But those are the demonized words. Militia is another one. Those are the demonized words that they try to tag on to somebody to destroy somebody. And they tried to go after Charles Key because Charles Key had a very close friend that was killed in the Murrah bombing. And he wanted to find out what the real truth was, and the more he began to look into it, the more he began to see the government just wasn't interested in certain amounts of evidence.
Right.
So that led to the bombing committee that for 6 years researched that, and they came out with a book called The Final Report. And that book is about probably 500 or 600 pages long, and it's full of depositions and evidence to show that there perhaps was a broader group of people involved in the Murrah bombing than just Nichols and just McVeigh. And so, trying to bring that up to destroy Charles Key.
Can I bring up one
Yeah.
thing I'd love to touch on it? One of the things that editorial mentioned was that Charles Key had abused his use of the state credit card. We have 3 current state legislators and I think 1 former state legislator. Can I ask the 4 of y'all, have you ever misused your use of your state credit card? What? The reality is state legislators don't get a state credit card to abuse. That was such an extraordinary example of a completely false thing. I think he's got a case for libel.
Well, like I said, hey, I'm not perfect. I made some statements that weren't based on fact in my life, but I expect a little more out of the Oklahoman. After all, they have full-time employees that have the time to get it right before they write something like that. So, okay, George, where are you? Thank you, sir. Come on up here. I'm very happy to have George Faught come today. And please welcome him as a state representative here with us today. When Dan Bourne announced that he would not run for re-election, George, you probably were the first person to really kind of jump on the wagon and start working toward replacing Dan Bourne. This is a seat that 2 years ago we had a very good race by a candidate that had no support from the state party or any of the national organizations. And he was able to raise, about $100,000 total, maybe a little over $100,000 total, and still came close to unseating Dan Bourne. And so, obviously, this time we have multiple candidates that have run for this position. We're in a runoff situation between Markwyane Mullin and George here. Now, I called AH Strategies to ask them if they would allow Mr. Mullin to come today, and was told they would not. Now, if I had talked to Markwyane, perhaps he would have overruled that, and I didn't do that. But everything I've heard is he's been on a fairly short leash by this group. And I want to say this first off. Mr. Mullin took over a business that was in debt and struggling when he was 19 years old. And he's turned that into a mega powerhouse of a business. And so I want to credit him right off the bat with being a good businessman. George is a good businessman also. But I want to credit him right off the bat with being that. And that's always a good sign. But being a good businessman does not necessarily equate to or assure you of being a good lawmaker. Because if you don't have an ideology developed, And if you don't know what the issues are out there, are you going to learn them? Or are you just going to be someone that's controlled by a handler all the time? By your staff all the time? And that's something I hope, regardless of who wins, whether it's you or Markwyane Mullin, that you will learn and learn and learn. I like what Coburn says, I'm not going to make a decision until I hear both sides of an issue. And how many times do we just hear one side of an issue? And it's unfortunate. I am disappointed he's not here today, you know, but that's just the way it is. And so with us today is George Faught from Muskogee, Oklahoma. He's running for the United States Congress, 2nd District. George will give you 8 or 10 minutes to tell us anything you want, and then you have to undergo what we lovingly call the Inquisition here. All right. You'll stand in front of this for filming purposes.
Okay.
It'll be much better.
Okay. Let me slide over here.
Won't be getting the glare of the mirrors.
Well, I think it's just a great privilege to be able to be here. And it's great to have Randy here in front. I'll talk about something we tried to do that we actually accomplished, which is something I'll take to Washington. But just my wife Becky's here, so welcome her. We're going to celebrate 30 years in December of happily married. You know, when you go to any kind of doctor's office and they have a little box and you look married, divorced, single, they never have happily, so I always have to scribble it in there mark. And you can follow me around in doctor's offices, and I'll try to do that every time I can. But she's certainly been a champ. She's always been involved, and our family is involved. I've got 3 grown kids, 28, 22, and almost 20. So we have always been together as a family in everything we did. We homeschool our kids. I've got a carpet cleaning business in Muskogee. I've had that for 25 years. I really didn't get into politics until I was age 44, when I was asked to run for an open seat in Muskogee. Now, if anybody knows anything about Muskogee, there aren't a lot of Republicans in Muskogee. It was 72% registered Democrat whenever I ran. I was told I didn't stand a chance of winning, but conservatism wins in Oklahoma, even in the 2nd District. And that's how I won. People saw my life, they saw my business, and they listened to what I was going to say, and more importantly, what I followed up and did. Not only won in 2006, in 2008 I was the #1 target for the Democrat Party. The floor majority leader at the time on the Democrats stood up one day and said I was a fluke. I should have never been here. They sent 9 current or former legislators to campaign against me. We won in bigger numbers, and in 2010 I was actually unopposed. So instead of taking the summer off, I actually worked to build the Republican Party in the 2nd District. At that time there were only 3 Republicans, myself in Muskogee, Dr. Cox up in Grove, and then Pat Jones in Claremore at the time. And we worked up and down that district. We helped Josh McKean win his state Senate race against gum. We were helping him get the gum out. As a carpet cleaner, I can understand that. We helped several other races up and down that district to build conservative legislators so that even the Democrats can think it's okay to switch parties. Because they stay Democratic because they want to vote in the local elections. But this 2nd District is so important. It's important for a lot of reasons. It's important for our nation because we've got to return people who understand what the Constitution means. They understand the role of government and are willing to uphold that. It's important because we see government getting into every aspect of our lives. And, you know, you talked about regulations. We've seen regulations. Senator Brogdon at the time and I were attacking the administrative rules that happen in Oklahoma where bureaucrats craft rules that either raise a fee or change something that becomes law. We tried, boy did we try to get that heard. We held it over the 2nd year. We went to the Speaker's office. The Speaker wouldn't hear it. But fortunately, what we were able to do in 2011 is to run legislation that if it had a fee increase or if it had a scope of practice expansion, get this, the legislature would actually have to vote on it for it to happen. And I'll tell you what we saw happen this year. This was the first year that bill actually took place. I had, on numerous occasions, an agency come to me with their rules, because I was the chairman of the committee. And they said, I've got these rules and there's a fee increase. And I said, have you found anybody willing to run it? And they said, well, not yet. I said, well, good luck with that. I don't know how many fee increases we defeated. I don't know how many scopes of practice we prevented, because that's how the EPA, that's how the banking laws, that's how all these regulations are coming down on businesses across this country through the rulemaking process without the legislative oversight that it needs to have. I plan on taking that same model to Washington, D.C. so that we can put some constraints in. That's the one. It's not glamorous. You won't wind up on Fox News, but I'll tell you, it'll surely be effective. Because the last year, before that went into effect, 1 week, Healthcare Authority had 54 rules stacked from the table up this high for one legislator to go through in 1 week. Do you know how many rules they brought this year? Not that much. Because they knew that they could no longer run free over the legislature because someone was going to hold them accountable. And then the other thing we've got to do, I don't know, who loves paying taxes in here? No, I don't. Being self-employed, I've signed both sides of the check. I've written my paycheck and I've held it until I can cover it because of the work you in your air conditioning business. You understand that too. So I understand the struggles that small businesses, and I hear from large businesses across the district, that they're hurting. Not because there's too much government, is they're taking too much of their work. And one of my favorite stories to tell you real quick is, I was born on the farm out in the country. We had a dairy. We were milking 100 head of cows. My grandfather had a really good lily pad pond across the pasture, and I'd go there as a teenager and I'd be fishing. And I'd hear my grandfather up on the hill getting his truck. And one day I caught about a 4-pound bass, and I was pretty proud of myself. And he was driving down through the pasture, and he pulls up to the pond. He gets out and he says, well, son, what'd you catch? Well, here I was a teenager, 10, 12 years old. And I was pretty proud of that fish, so I held it up there. And he said, well, bring it here. I'm thinking my grandfather's going to say, man, you're a great kid. You caught this big fish. Well, he pulls out his pocket knife, cuts that fish in half. He takes the tail, gives me the head, and say, that's your part. That's what government is doing to business today. They're taking your product, cutting it in half, they're taking the tail, and leaving you nothing but a head. It may look big, but it sure doesn't pay the bills, does it? It's time that we reform the tax system. It's time that we return this government back to what it needs to be, a limited government with limited power over the individual. And that's what we've got to do. And then the other thing that we've got to make sure that we stand up for it. And, I know you guys have been here in Italianos for a lot. I didn't come to eat lunch here today because I'm going to go pay a little business to a business today that's under fire. Chick-fil-A. They're standing up for traditional marriage. But that's the other issue to stand up for. To stand up for life that begins at conception, marriage that is between one man and one woman in one union, in my opinion, for life. And to stand up for godly principles that our government was founded upon. I'm not ashamed to stand up for that on the House floor, on the steps of the Capitol. We stood up with the Stand With Israel before, and so that's an easy battle that I'm going to fight. One of the things I want to leave you with before we start taking some questions are some of the endorsements that we've received. Governor Mike Huckabee has endorsed our campaign. He actually endorsed my state house race in 2008 because of my values. He endorsed my congressional race. Citizens United has endorsed. Concerned Women for America has endorsed. Phyllis Schlafly and Eagle Forum has endorsed the race. Family Research Council. They've done, and Gun Owners of America, the OK2A here in Oklahoma. They've done that because I've got a proven record. This job is too important to send someone who doesn't understand issues. I've been a small businessman who's successful. I've got a strong family. And I've got legislative experience that I know about the healthcare exchange. Led the fight to defeat that whenever Oklahoma was given the $54 million to set up an exchange. Well, I tell you, anytime the government gives you anything, they've got strings attached, and it's going to be tied around the necks of our kids and and our grandkids and their future. So led the fight. Oklahoma has stood against that with the state question. It's pretty clear where Oklahomans stand on Obamacare. We don't want it. We don't want socialized medicine. And I'll fight that fight in Washington, D.C. as well. So obviously there's lots of ways that you can help the campaign, and we'll take questions in a minute, but phone calls, we've got people in Oklahoma City that are making phone calls. We've got folks that have been contributing from Oklahoma City. It takes money to run a race, and I'm running against a guy who's got some pretty deep pockets. And it's interesting that AA Strategies didn't want to come here because they don't want their candidate to have to answer the questions. It's time that we send someone who's capable, someone who understands the issues, and someone who's willing to take the battle to Washington, D.C., because we've got to change the culture. Washington needs to know 2 letters, and it's N-O. No. We have a balanced budget in Oklahoma. We need a balanced budget in Washington, and we actually need to teach them how to cut the budget instead of, oh, I'll just take a little bit off. Kind of like going to the barber. I guess just take a little off the side. It's time that we cut the size of government. So with that, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, let me go first. Yes. And I've only got one, and we'll turn it over to the sharks here. When the Republicans took control in 2010 in Congress, there were early on several issues that potentially would shut the government down and really bring it to a head. One I thought was really important is Connie Mack out of Florida had a very rational, reasonable plan to reduce the deficit. And yet, Mr. Boehner would not go with that, was not willing to shut the government down. And I have a concern about you, George, and I'm going to let you answer this, because the day before the session ended this year, you first voted against our budget, and then later that afternoon you switched your vote to vote for the budget. And I'm looking for someone that I don't care what leadership wants. We have serious problems that we're looking at out there. I mean, we have problems that are going to bring this nation down if we don't get a handle on the deficit spending. Tell me why and how I can have confidence that you'll stand up for that. And I was disappointed in your vote to change there.
Well, there's actually two parts of that. He's talking about the McPenny plan, which actually, if you just cut everything by 1% in 10 years, 6 or 8 years, that actually the budget would be balanced. It's unfortunate that we've not taken on common sense measures, that we have to cut the size of government. More to Charlie's question of why I switched my vote on the budget. Unfortunately, the budget system, well, fortunately for Oklahoma, we've got a balanced budget. And then we've got a time frame that we're actually supposed to do that constitutionally to get the budget out and take care of that and go about our business. I wish the budget involved every member of the legislature. It doesn't, unfortunately. It involves just a few, usually just about 2 or 3 per house. We were dealing with trying to get a tax cut that was going to be a responsible tax cut bill. We were unable to get one that was responsible. We had actually $32 million worth of growth revenue that we were going to use to cut the income tax level down. The House and the Governor and the Senate all had 3 different plans as far as tax cuts. We saw the budget with numbers in it the last week. That's how we saw it. It was kind of, here it is, take it or leave it. And just looking through that bill, and you know, I didn't like many of the things that were in there, and I voted against that. Contrary to some of the rumors, I was not called by the governor. I was not called by leadership. Sat down with some friends of mine and talked about the issues of what is our responsibility as legislators. I heard talk that if this budget failed, that we could go into a special session, which would cost the taxpayers more. And because the tax cut plan didn't take effect, there was an extra $32 million that everyone was wanting to start spending. And then I kept hearing, well, maybe we'll give more money to education. All the bond issues failed, which I'm glad. But then they were thinking, okay, well, maybe we can pull some money here, money there. And I had to make the decision between two bad choices of either take the budget that I knew, or we go into special session and we're going to most likely see higher spending levels. I think the difference that we have is in Oklahoma is the constitutional mandate to get a budget done. In Washington, we flinch too often as Republicans, and you know, they don't have the same constraints, and they've not ever had to live under that. So I'm not. And you talk about going against the party. If you look who's lining up against my opponent, it is the movers and shakers of the state chambers. It's not the little old ladies in the 2nd district. It's not the conservative, the philosophically.
For your opponent?
Yeah, the state chambers and the big players in the Republican Party are the ones that are supporting my opponent. You're seeing the social conservative groups line up behind me because of my track record, because they know how I'm going to vote on issues. And you know, I'll defend my record. You know, there's votes that you know, maybe you wish you might have done differently, but I'll stand on my record and not make excuses.
Okay. Someone else?
Questions?
Bob?
Yes, sir.
Sir, thank you for running. I appreciate you doing that, by the way. It is big. It is a lot of work. As a congressman, the Congress has to deal with the issue of our foreign policy. Right now, when I want to see what our nation's government is going to do in dealing with foreign policy, I find it most accurately tracks what the Council on Foreign Relations puts out. I look at their website and I know what our military is going to do tomorrow. But constitutionally, that shouldn't be coming out of the CFR. It should be coming out of Congress. And I really see Congress being ignored. What do you see you could possibly do to realistically bring that back to the accountability of Congress and the people, as opposed to a think tank like that out there?
Sure. Did everyone hear his question? Basically, our foreign policy is not run through Congress. It's run through think tanks that have different agendas. And what we've seen is a stark departure from the authority that we're supposed to be having in the Constitution and how government. And honestly, I think if we just look at foreign policy, let's start determining whether or not America has an interest there. Is it an interest that affects us or one of our allies, instead of continuing to promote this foreign aid to folks who really want to wipe us off the face of the earth? I think that there's a big enough group, especially if you talk about the last election and maybe the Tea Party candidates. And I know the Tea Party's not a party, but the folks who adhere to a limited government, we've got a large group of those who are actually at times were able to push Boehner back on some issues, maybe make him slow down, and you know, obviously they were run over a few times as well, but I think it's just in numbers of sending folks who are not career politicians, folks who understand what a citizen legislator is, to go up and represent the needs of the folks and also align with the Constitution. So I think it's building those relationships and trying to bring that control back to the government and not to those outside groups, which I think part of that administrative rules process can be, because you're bringing the accountability back to government instead of off-site with non-elected bureaucrats.
Someone else? Jerome?
My name is Jerome Montgomery, sir. I happen to be a very staunch admirer of a congressman by the name of Ron Paul. I'm not asking you, would you vote for Ron Paul? That's not my issue. My issue is, where would you be okay, are you in sync with Ron Paul on all of his issues, or another way of saying it, where are you diametrically opposed to Ron Paul in an area? Okay. Say H.R. 1146 to get the United States out of the United Nations, the seat for the one world government.
Sure.
I'm asking a question given that.
Sure.
And then the H.R. 1207 to audit the Federal Reserve, the monopoly crowd, cartel, you know. So I'll stop. How do you match up with Ron Paul?
On those two issues, I agree with those issues. I think we've got to audit the Fed, and we need to get out of the UN. In fact, why don't we just get them out of the United States?
Where would you differ with him? That was another.
Probably some of his, he may have some more libertarian views than I do. I think that's probably some of the issues. He is, you know, I honestly don't know a lot of his issues where we might differ. I just know that I would agree with those two issues.
Foreign aid.
Foreign aid, I think there is a role for some foreign aid, and I think it needs to be qualified with, is it an interest that the United States has? And obviously I support Israel or one of our allies. I certainly think we're giving way too much, we're giving aid to people that we shouldn't be even giving anything to. And I guess I've found that maybe we're not so far off whenever you start talking about some of these policies. And I've had lots of conversations with some Ron Paul folks about foreign aid, so we may not be that much different. But just maybe the libertarian, farther libertarian views than I may have.
Let me ask a quick mic on that.
Okay.
Just from a philosophical perspective on foreign aid, if foreign aid can be given, say, in the way of arms to be a bulwark against an advancement of, say, communism or something of that nature, that might be construed in the interest of the United States. But foreign aid just to feed and help people and things like that, even times of tragedy and all, is that a function of government or is that a function of the private sector? That's a philosophical difference there, and I think it's important to know what your philosophy is on that.
Well, I don't believe that the aid that you're talking about that's the non-military, I don't know that necessarily falls underneath the role of government. Let me give you a perfect example of something that I tried to fight this year. We actually had a board that it was the Charitable Donations Board here in Oklahoma, where they actually allow the United Way is the main recipient to come into federal offices or state offices and make the payroll deduction, where the state's taking a payroll deduction from that individual, and then it would be given to those charities. I have a problem with that because I don't think the state government ought to be choosing which charitable organization we're going to let have access to state employees. In today's society, they could have easily done just an auto draft themselves. I didn't think that was a core function of government. Boy, did I take hits from my own community because I was taking away the United Way's ability to use government to facilitate their contributions. That was not a core function of government. It's not for government to, well, just like the dues that are taken out for teachers or state employees unions. That's not a core function of government. What benefit is that to government? It's not. So as far as just giving aid to give aid just because we want to promote abortions in some other country, or we want to promote lifestyles, or we want to get food, you know, that's not what America ought to be doing. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you which article of the Constitution allows our federal government to give aid to foreign countries. You know, it's our tax money. Why are we giving it to another country?
Yeah, well, I don't believe it's in there.
Thank you. Unless it's a declaration of war.
Exactly, which is done through Congress. Any other questions?
Someone else?
Over here, yes, sir.
I believe Representative Doug Cox endorsed your opponent. In view of the fact that he's been named by this group as a rhino several times, and this year got 29% conservative rating, you got 90%. Are you going to emphasize that?
Well, if Doug Cox endorses your opponent, I'm on your side.
Yeah, I've used Dr. Cox for a few questions on medical issues, but he and I differ a lot, especially in the area of life. But yeah, you can. I think you're known by the folks that endorse you and that follow you around too as well. And if you just look and see a lot of the endorsements that have come his way, have been because they just check and see who their
Strategist is?
Yes, exactly.
Who runs the campaign?
Yes.
I wonder if any strategist ever ran the campaign for Dr. Cox.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, you know, I've got an interesting story to tell. Whenever I first was looking at this race, Fountain Holland actually called me. And he said he wanted to come talk about the race. And I thought, well, I'll just let him come talk. I wasn't going to use it. Spent an hour on my couch. He ran our first race, the first two races, because he was from Muskogee. He was the only person we knew at the time, and we cut our ties with him. After an hour's worth of talking, and he knows everything about me. A week later, I called him. I said, "Okay, so are you going to give me a proposal to run a campaign?" He said, "Well, I should really tell you, I've been working with Markwyane for about a year now." So you know, that speaks volumes to me. Speaks volumes to me. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, it speaks volumes to me that he's not running your campaign. Thank you. Yeah, and I very much appreciate that you seem to answer that question, especially asked the way that Thomas did it. That it's just not constitutional to have to give one name. Are we on the same page?
Yes, yes, we are. Her question was that she was piggybacking off of Thomas's question about whether it was really constitutional to give a foreign aid.
So are you gonna, if you win, are you gonna put your hand in the Bible and swear an oath to uphold that Constitution?
I'll do that.
You know what that means. You know what that means. I mean, we had several years ago, Ernest took here, and he was asked a pointed question like that, and he finally just said, "I don't want to answer that question." You know? I mean, it's serious, folks. That document, he said he loved it, and he cherished it, he read it all the time. And one of our members pointed out some of his actions that were contrary to that. And why did he do it? He stood there for a few seconds and finally said, "I just don't want to answer that question." That's the seriousness of it. I mean, if you're a 90%er, tell us you're a 90%er. If you're 80, 70, 30, Nancy Pelosi, 5%, 2.5%, you know? Tell us.
She's for the part where she's in line to be president.
Oh,
Well, you know something I might mention to you folks, if you'd like to see a comparison of myself and Markwyane Mullin, there's only going to be one chance that you're going to be able to do that. We did have a debate at Rogers State University. It's on our Facebook, and it may still be on the Rogers State University site. It was supposed to be an hour long. Their camp would only agree to 30 minutes, and after you watch the debate, you'll see why. He's very scripted.
did you know the questions beforehand?
No, but they wanted to know those.
Okay.
And we had a chance to ask each other a question. So I lost the toss. I seem to always be going first, but that's okay. So my first question to him was, if you become the next congressman, what are the first two pieces of legislation that you would file? And he said, "Well, I'm not going to file any legislation. There's too much government as there is." And I guess he didn't realize that in order to even get rid of government, you have to have legislation. So my first two were to repeal Obamacare, and then the Administrative Rules Bill to try to bring some accountability to unelected bureaucrats. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Sir, the issue of going to war. Okay. You made reference to the idea of bureaucrats and their role in determining, if I got it right, you know, the idea of when we go to war and how and all that. What is the process by which our military goes through now to determine they're actually going to conduct a war? Who decides that? Not what constitutionally, but what is actually followed today. Do you know what that process is?
Well, I know it's not through the declaration of war through Congress, which is unfortunate. So it's probably through many of what you were talking about earlier, the think tanks or the president deciding, okay, this is where I need to go, and that's unfortunate. There needs to be a deliberate process before we commit troops, and there needs to be a definable goal, and what are we going to accomplish? And I think we've gotten into some conflicts now that we don't really know. In fact, I was talking to some friends at our church who have, I think, a son and maybe a nephew who are in Afghanistan, and they're actually treated like criminals anytime they discharge their weapon. I mean, they're the ones who feel like they're the criminal just because they've had to discharge their weapon. So there is no goal, and I think it's unfortunate that we are putting our best and brightest at risk for something that they don't even know why they're there. So I think the process should be to go through the Congress, the president making the request and getting authorization through Congress. That's not happening now, and
When's the last time that happened, do you know? He's supposed to be the guy.
You're supposed to, like Pat Sajak can say, shh.
Sir, I have a friendly question for you if I
Yes,
might jump in.
Yes, sir.
All right, and it's really a friendly question.
Well, the others haven't been unfriendly.
I'm a homeschooler, just so you
Okay,
know.
great.
Why is it that you and your wife homeschool?
Well, we chose to homeschool for a couple of reasons. One, our son, my wife walked into a class, and he was going to be in kindergarten, and she walked into the class, and he was looking all around the room, and he could read everything that was already up there. And this was at the end of the year, so we thought, okay, we've got a child who is very good at learning, who loves to read. He was reading at age 4. But more importantly, we wanted to instill in them some Christian character. And if, you always hear about, the biggest thing about homeschool, they talk about, what about socialization? And I say exactly. I don't want my kids to be socialized by the world. I want to have control of how their life is going to be formatted, and so that they can have an impact. And that's what we've been able to accomplish. Our oldest son spent 8 years working for Senator Coburn. He was 19 years old as a Senate staffer in D.C., so I guess that's not too shabby. Our 22-year-old is running our carpet cleaning business, has been for the last year, getting married in September to a little 4'10" Spitfire that we met through the Capitol from North Carolina. And our daughter is going to be 20 in September. I told her she can't get married until she's 35.
And the one that's running your carpet business, has he had anything to do with tea parties by any chance?
Well, he was at age 18 at a Muskogee Tea Party. He's been just a little preoccupied this last year. His Muskogee Politico blog has suffered a little bit, but he's his own guy, and I've raised my kids to be able to be free thinkers. I don't tell them what they're supposed to do, but I instill in them the character and the basis for them to make their decisions. And honestly, I think they've done a pretty good job. But it's all to God's glory, not mine.
2 more quick questions. What do you know about Agenda 21? And if you know anything about it, what's your thoughts on it?
Well, Agenda 21, I don't know everything about it, but I know Bobby McCall, and she and I have sat down and talked about it. It talks about how the UN wants to come in and create the sustainable communities. They want to take away our rights as citizens. They want to take away our rights as a country, and we've got to fight against that. It's unfortunate that even some of our senators don't have a clue about what it is, but I think it's a discussion that has to happen. We've got to fight back because the UN is trying to creep into every aspect of their life. You'd probably be surprised if you sat down and just looked to see all the different areas of how the UN and this current administration is trying to change the culture of America. Even through, I was just reading just the other night with the gasoline excise tax, how they're trying to cause the gas prices to be so high that you're going to look for an alternative vehicle to have to drive around. How un-American is that? I pulled up to the gas pump the other day and put $98 in my work van, and I'm thinking, okay, that's about half of an ordinary job. How far am I going to have to drive, and how many jobs am I going to get on that tank of gas? But that's my choice. That's my choice. Let's let Americans choose the destiny that they want instead of someone else who's not even concerned about America.
Final question. When our founders created this government, they created 3 branches, an executive, legislative, and a judicial. And each of them had a turf or a territory. And they wanted them to jealously guard their own territory so that one didn't rise up and become a tyrant over the rest of them. Now, our founders gave a tool to Congress to rein in a runaway judiciary or a runaway executive branch of government. What is that tool? And if you know what it is, no answer. If you know what it is, I want to know if you've got the backbone to even use it.
Well, obviously for the president, we can impeach him, and then we can remove judges from the bench. Unfortunately, political correctness has caused people to be bashful and to sit back because they don't want to cause the strife. I'm willing to fight those fights. Hey, I'm from Muskogee. My first bill that I ran in 2007 was English official language, and I was right in the heart of the Cherokee Nation. But it was because it was right. I've run immigration legislation And, you know, those folks park outside your office and you learn to deal with it. It's a battle. But the reason that I'm running for Congress, Charlie, is because I know the Lord has led me in this path. And I know that He will give strength. Sometimes it's daily, sometimes it's hourly, to fight those battles, because this country is too important for that to not be the forefront of someone's reason to be there. It's not about my business. It's not about how it's hurt my bottom line. It's not about what I'm going to gain about this. It's about passing on the American vision that our founding fathers had of a free government that protected life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that pursuit of happiness was property ownership. Those are the three things that government ought to allow you to do. And what we're seeing is stepping on life issues, because they're not wanting to say when life begins at conception. They want to redefine a marriage. They want to take away our liberties of how we operate our businesses, how we worship our Savior, how we do every aspect, and then they want to ultimately take away our property. So I'm going to be up there and I'm going to fight for those things regardless.
Do you think the executive branch has encroached upon the responsibilities of Congress, Eddie?
Oh, yeah.
All right. George, thank you so much for being here. Just before you go, I have several new items over here. If you'll let me step over here and show these to you, and then we'll be dismissed, and next week we'll be interviewing candidates for the state legislature. I don't think this will reach, so you just have to use my voice. Something new here. This is the role of pastors and Christians in civil government by David Barton. Also, I have a DVD by David Barton on the ideas of our founding fathers as far as what is necessary to have quality education. If you watch this, you'll see why our government schools are in the condition they're in. One of the speakers at the Reclaiming America conference was Michael Chapman. This is his famous DVD called America's Censored Heritage. 2 hours. If you want to know why our children no longer believe we live in the greatest nation in America, this will show you why. Then, this is pretty much his presentation here. It's called Education for Sustainable Tyranny. And he shows how, by interfacing with the United Nations, our government schools are actually turning our children into little greenies, little environmentalists, little earth worshippers. Excellent here. I've been out of these. This is the pink swastika, and I have this. All these are below prices you would have got them there. Therefore, donation of any amount, I have recommended prices on there. So those are a few things. This is another one here and this is only 2 copies left. These are out of print by William Norman Gregg, Freedom on the Altar. It's the ideas of the United States, the United Nations for religion. You'd be shocked at what's in here. This is something new I've never had here before. Governing by Principle. It's actually put out by a conservative think tank out of Mississippi. And I have an audio version of this too. And then in addition here is a little book called The Practical Benefits of Christianity. There are a lot of people today that have no interest in any kind of eternal or spiritual concepts of Christianity. And they think there's no value in being a Christian. Yet, the benefits of Christianity are enormous, whether you believe in eternal life or not. And so, I have these different items here. Please, one more here. Besides the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, I have a DVD here, which is a fictionalized debate between Madison and Patrick Henry. Madison was an advocate for the Federalists, and Patrick Henry was an Anti-Federalist. And so this will do a very good job of showing what that debate was all about. Because after the convention, it took about 3 years to get it confirmed, and they never got the Bill of Rights done. So anyway, some new items, recommended donation amounts are in front of these. Please help yourself. Thank you for coming today, and we will see you folks next week.